Poor Omega bought the broken Alpha at auction. Now he demands her soul. The city of Ashdon lay shrouded in mist, the tall spires of its black stone castles clawing at the clouds above. At night, the streets smelled of burning incense and wet earth, and the glow of lanterns painted the cobblestones gold and crimson. It was a city where the supernatural and mortal intertwined, a place ruled by the strong and feared by the weak. Among its hidden streets, an auction house opened its heavy doors once every decade, and within its walls, destiny itself seemed to hang in the balance. Lyra, a young Omega with a heart full of courage and little else, had arrived in Ashdon just as the first bell tolled. Her small hands clutched a leather pouch filled with coins she had saved for months. Each coin represented hope, a dream of rescuing someone who had lost everything. That someone was Kale, the broken Alpha, a man whispered about in fearful tones across kingdoms. He had once ruled a land far beyond Ashdon, a land of golden fields and shining towers. But betrayal, blood magic, and a curse had reduced him to a shadow of his former self, leaving him bound by chains in a dark corner of the auction house. Lyra's heart pounded as she entered the hall. The air was thick with anticipation and tension. Nobles in fine cloaks whispered in sharp, clipped tones, while powerful alphas and fearsome creatures circled the central platform, eyeing the captives like hunters appraising prey. The auctioneer, a tall figure with eyes like polished onyx, raised a hand and began to speak. "Tonight, we offer what the world has forgotten," his voice echoed, deep and commanding. "Souls broken by fate, power stolen by betrayal. Step forward and claim your destiny." Lyra's stomach tightened as Kale was brought onto the platform. His tall frame, even bound in chains, radiated strength and menace. His dark hair fell over one eye, hiding the scar that ran across his cheek. Yet, despite the chains, his presence was magnetic. Every head turned toward him, every whisper fell silent. Kale's eyes met Lyra's for the briefest moment, and she felt an electric shiver run through her. There was anger there, yes, but also something else, something raw and aching, like a wound that had never healed. He did not speak, only regarded her silently, and she felt as if he could see straight into her soul. Bidding began. Powerful alphas offered fortunes, their voices harsh and sharp, while nobles tried to outbid one another with coins and cursed trinkets. Lyra's fingers tightened around her pouch, counting each coin over and over. She had no wealth, no power, no advantage in this hall of shadows, yet she could not walk away. Her heart told her that Kale was meant to be hers to save. The bids climbed higher and higher, and soon, Lyra was the last person standing against a sea of fortune and force. Fear trembled in her chest, but determination burned brighter. She swallowed her fear and stepped forward. I bid all I have," she said, her voice small but steady. "I bid it for him." A hush fell over the room. The auctioneer's dark eyes narrowed as if studying her for a flaw. A powerful alpha sneered from the crowd. "A mere Omega dares to bid on the broken Alpha, foolish girl." Lyra's gaze did not waver. "I do not seek to own him," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I only wish to help him, to give him a chance to be free again." The auctioneer paused, then nodded. "Very well," he said. "She claims him." Chains clinked as Kale was handed over. His eyes, still guarded, widened ever so slightly at her words. There was a flicker of curiosity, a spark of recognition that she could not yet understand. The walk out of the auction house was tense. The city streets were dark and quiet, the fog curling around their feet. Lyra led Kale through narrow alleys, careful not to draw attention. He walked beside her with a strange stillness, his eyes scanning every shadow as if the darkness itself might strike. I am Lyra," she said finally, her voice breaking the silence. "I promised I would help you. Will you let me?" Kale looked at her then, his gaze piercing and heavy. "Help me," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel over steel. "Do you know what you are saying? Do you understand what I am?" Lyra nodded, gripping his hand lightly. I do not fear what you are, she whispered. I only fear a world where someone like you suffers alone. For a long moment, Kale said nothing. The wind whipped through the streets, tugging at their cloaks and hair. Then slowly he lifted his chained hands. The chains seemed to rattle in protest, but he did not resist. You are different, he said, almost to himself. Most would run or beg for mercy. You step forward. His voice softened, almost vulnerable for the first time. Perhaps you will regret it. Lyra's chest tightened, but she refused to show fear. Then I will face regret with you, she said firmly. They reached a small, abandoned house at the edge of the city, a place Lyra had rented for this purpose. The walls were cold and dark, but she had lit lanterns to create warmth, small pockets of light in the oppressive gloom. She carefully removed Kale's chains, one by one, watching his tense shoulders relax as he regained a measure of freedom. Kale touched the chains gently, almost reverently, as if remembering their weight would remind him of the life he had lost. Chains are not just metal, he murmured. They are the memory of all I have endured. Lyra hesitated, then said, Perhaps you do not have to endure it alone anymore. Kale's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it quickly vanished. Do not mistake my silence for gratitude. You meddle in things far beyond your understanding. I understand enough, Lyra replied softly. I understand that you are in pain and that no one deserves to be abandoned to it. He looked at her then, fully, the storm in his eyes quieting just enough for a glimmer of something gentler to shine through. You are brave, he said, his voice a whisper, and foolish, perhaps in equal measure. Lyra allowed herself a small smile, though her heart pounded in her chest. Then perhaps I am exactly what you need. Kale shook his head, turning away to the window, his gaze lost in the fog that rolled over the city. You do not yet know me, he murmured. I am not a man to be saved, and yet I feel the weight of your intent. Dangerous as it may be, it is alluring. Lyra felt a shiver at his words, a mixture of fear and strange warmth. There was danger here, certainly, but also the faintest hope. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. I do not seek to conquer you, Kale, she said gently. I only wish to walk beside you if you will let me. For a moment, Kale said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy with the ghosts of his past and the promise of something new. Then he spoke, voice low and almost threatening in its intimacy. You do not own me, yet I cannot promise that I will not take a piece of you in return. Lyra's heart skipped a beat, a mix of fear and longing stirring deep inside her. She did not speak, only nodded, letting her silence speak for her trust. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it whispers of fate and shadows. Inside, the light of the lanterns flickered, casting Kale's face in half shadow, half gold. In that moment, Lyra understood that their journey had only just begun. There would be danger, tests of will and shadows from Kale's past that would not easily release him. Yet, she also understood something deeper, a connection forged not by chains or circumstance, but by the courage to care when most would turn away. Kale finally lowered his gaze to meet hers. If we walk this path together, he said slowly, know this, I am not whole. I am broken in ways that may frighten you even now. And if you truly wish to stay, you must be ready to face all that I have been. Lyra's hand tightened around his, her resolve unwavering. I am ready, she said. Even if it frightens me, I will stay. Kale's eyes lingered on her, a storm of emotion flashing in their depths. There was pain, yes, but also a strange gratitude and curiosity. He let her hand remain in his, though he did not speak again. The quiet stretched, and in it, a fragile understanding formed, a bond neither of them fully recognized, yet both felt as the first thread of destiny weaving between them. As the lanterns flickered one last time, Kale whispered almost to himself, You dare to buy a broken alpha, and yet you may be the only one capable of saving him. Or perhaps you will be the one to break him completely. Lyra felt the weight of those words, but she did not flinch. She only squeezed his hand, determined to face whatever fate had cast before them. The shadows outside whispered promises of trials, and Kale's soul trembled, aware that this Omega might be more dangerous than any enemy he had faced, and yet perhaps also the first true hope he had ever known. The night deepened, and the city of Ashdon held its breath. Cliffhanger Kale's voice, dark and low, echoed in the small room. "I will watch you, Omega, and soon I will demand your soul." Lyra shivered, uncertain whether it was a threat or a warning, and knew with a strange certainty that her life had changed forever. The morning light struggled through the thick, foggy windows of the small house Lyra had rented. The streets outside were silent except for the soft tapping of distant hooves and the occasional clatter of carts over cobblestones. Inside, the air was still, heavy with unspoken words and the lingering presence of Kale. Kale sat in a shadowed corner, his tall frame hunched, eyes staring at the floor. The chains that had bound him at the auction had been removed, yet the weight of his past seemed to cling to him like a second skin. Lyra approached slowly, careful not to startle him. "I made some tea," she said softly, setting a small pot on the wooden table. "It may not be much, but it is warm." Kale's gaze lifted briefly. His eyes, dark and stormy, lingered on her for a long moment. "Warmth is meaningless to someone who has known the cold of betrayal," he muttered, his voice rough, almost brittle. Then he looked away, as if her presence alone was enough to stir memories he preferred to forget. Lyra's heart ached at his words, but she did not retreat. She poured the tea into 2 cups and set one before him. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "but even the smallest warmth can remind us that life still holds something worth caring for." Kale's hands hovered over the cup but did not lift it. He regarded her silently, as though measuring her courage against his own shadowed past. Finally, he muttered, "And why do you care for a broken alpha, a man who is more danger than ally?" Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Because no one else would," she said simply. "Because someone must see that even broken souls can be healed." Kale's lips twitched, almost a smirk, though his eyes remained guarded. "Bold words from one so small," he said, gesturing to her slight frame. "Do you not fear what you are trying to touch?" "I do fear," Lyra admitted, "but courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it." The room fell silent, save for the gentle hiss of the tea kettle. Kale finally lifted the cup, letting his fingers brush hers as he took it. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent an unexpected shiver through both of them. "Perhaps you are different," he said softly, almost to himself. "Most would flee or beg for mercy. You step forward." Lyra felt a strange warmth in her chest at his words, a mixture of relief and curiosity. "I only wish to help," she said, "not to fight you, not to control you." Kale studied her for a long moment. "Control is what people desire most from me," he said, voice tight. "And yet I find myself watching you, wondering why you are not afraid of me." Her heart thudded. She did not move closer, only kept her hands folded in front of her. "Because I see the man beneath the darkness," she whispered. The corners of Kale's mouth twitched again, almost like a smile. "And yet the darkness does not forgive easily." Days passed, and each day brought new tests. Kale was restless, haunted by memories of betrayal and curses that gnawed at the edges of his mind. Some nights he would stand by the window, staring at the city below, silent and unapproachable. Other times he would pace the floor, fists clenched, muttering fragments of old curses he had learned in his youth. Lyra remained patient. She learned to navigate the storm of his moods, offering gentle words when his temper flared and silence when his mind needed peace. She tended to his wounds, both visible and invisible, and began to notice the subtleties of his pain, the twitch of a scar, the way his gaze lingered on shadows, the almost imperceptible tension in his shoulders. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in blood-red streaks, Kale spoke of his past for the first time. "My kingdom," he said quietly, staring at the floor, "was taken from me in a night." Those I trusted betrayed me, leaving me to the curse that now inhabits my blood. Power, strength, none of it matters when everything is stripped away. Lyra knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand over his. "You are not alone anymore," she said. "Whatever has taken from you, we can face it together. You do not have to carry it alone." Kale's hand remained still under hers, but his fingers twitched. "You speak of together," he said slowly, voice low. "Do you know what that means, Omega? To walk beside me is not merely dangerous, it is to risk your very soul." Lyra's eyes did not waver. "If my soul is the cost of helping you, then it is a price I will pay willingly," she said simply. Kale's gaze burned into hers, a storm of darkness and desire swirling in his eyes. "And yet, I feel a pull toward you that I cannot explain," he admitted, voice trembling slightly. "A pull I fear. You make me remember warmth, trust, something I thought I had lost forever." The room seemed to shift around them. The shadows deepened, but the lantern light made Kale's sharp features glow, revealing the raw vulnerability that he rarely allowed others to see. Lyra's heart ached for him, but she did not speak. Words were unnecessary. Her presence, steady and unflinching, spoke volumes. The next days brought new challenges. Kale's curse was not a simple shadow, it was a living force, restless and unpredictable. Strange occurrences began around the house. Flickering lanterns, sudden gusts of wind, whispers of voices that no one else could hear. Kale's body reacted violently to these manifestations, sometimes collapsing in exhaustion, other times lashing out at the invisible forces with fists or words. Lyra never faltered. She learned to anticipate the curse's movements, holding Kale when he trembled, whispering comfort when his mind became a battlefield. Slowly, a fragile trust formed between them, a trust built not on words, but on shared suffering and unspoken understanding. One night, under a sky heavy with clouds, a vision from the curse appeared. Shadows coalesced into forms of those who had betrayed Kale, faces twisted in mockery and rage. Kale fell to his knees, gripping his head, his voice a strangled whisper. "They are here, all of them. The ones I could not save, the ones I could not forgive." Lyra dropped to her knees beside him, placing a hand on his back. "You are not alone," she said, her voice firm despite the fear curling in her chest. "I am here. I will not leave you." Kale's body shook violently. "Even if I destroy you," he hissed. "I will face it," she said calmly. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The shadows writhed and dissolved, leaving Kale panting, exhausted yet alive. Slowly, he looked at Lyra, eyes wide and unguarded. You stay," he murmured, voice heavy with disbelief. "Why do you stay?" Lyra smiled faintly. "Because someone has to," she said softly. "Because even broken things deserve someone who believes in them." For the first time in years, Kale allowed himself to relax, though the darkness within him did not vanish completely. He had tasted kindness, a fragile hope that made him question the hardened walls he had built around his soul. Yet he remained wary, knowing that the curse was far from gone, and that every bond he formed could become a weapon against those he cared for. As days turned into nights, the two of them grew closer, though the line between trust and danger remained thin. Lyra's courage and steadfastness drew out glimpses of the man Kale had once been, proud, commanding, yet capable of tenderness. And in those glimpses, he saw a life he thought was lost, a life that perhaps, just perhaps, he could reclaim. One evening, a sudden knock at the door startled them. Kale rose instinctively, eyes flashing with suspicion. Lyra opened the door cautiously to find a cloaked figure, face hidden beneath a hood. "Kale," the figure whispered, voice low and urgent. "You are being hunted. They know you have been claimed, and they will come for both of you." Kale's eyes darkened. The shadows within him stirred, anger and fear rising in equal measure. "So soon," he muttered, his voice tight. "I thought I had time to heal, but they do not wait for the broken to recover." Lyra placed a hand on his arm. "Then we face them together," she said, her voice unwavering despite the fear in her heart. Kale looked at her, the storm in his eyes tempered by a flicker of gratitude and longing. "You are reckless," he said softly, "and yet I cannot bear the thought of facing this without you." The figure handed them a sealed note, heavy with warnings of betrayal, curses, and enemies who lurked in every shadow. As the door closed behind the messenger, Kale turned to Lyra. You step into a world of darkness willingly," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Do you truly understand what you are doing?" "I understand enough," Lyra replied, eyes steady. "I am not afraid of the darkness as long as you do not face it alone." Kale studied her for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Perhaps together we may yet survive," he said, though his eyes remained wary. "But know this, Omega, the darkness does not forgive and it does not sleep. And soon it will demand more than courage. It may demand your very soul." Lyra's hand met his again, steady and unwavering. "Then I will give it willingly," she whispered. Kale's lips twitched in a shadow of a smile. The first true flicker of hope in years touched his eyes, though the storm within him was far from calmed. The battle had only begun, and the path ahead would test them both in ways neither could yet imagine. Outside, the wind whispered through the streets of Ashdon, carrying with it the promise of trials, danger, and a bond that would be tested to the very edges of the soul. And in the quiet of that small house, a broken Alpha and a brave Omega prepared to face the darkness together, their fates intertwined in ways that neither could yet fully comprehend. Cliffhanger. Kale's eyes, dark and unreadable, lingered on Lyra. "You may survive this night," he murmured, "but soon the curse will awaken fully. And when it does, only one of us may remain unbroken." The night in Ashdon was heavier than usual, thick with fog that clung to the streets like a living thing. Inside the small house where Lyra and Kale had taken refuge, shadows flickered along the walls as the lanterns swayed in the draft. The city outside whispered secrets, and every creaking floorboard seemed like a warning. Kale had been restless all evening, pacing the floor, dark eyes shadowed with thoughts he would not share. Lyra sat at the wooden table, hands folded, trying to steady her own nerves. She had felt the pull of Kale's unrest all day. He was a storm contained within flesh and bone, his emotions unpredictable, his temper raw from years of betrayal, his curse stirring just beneath the surface. And yet, when his eyes met hers, she saw glimpses of something softer, something almost human that still remained despite all he had endured. Kale finally stopped pacing and leaned against the wall, the weight of exhaustion in his shoulders. "I feel it," he said, voice low and rough, almost like a growl. "The curse, it stirs tonight. I can feel it in the air, in the stones, in the blood in my veins." Lyra rose slowly, walking toward him. "Then we face it," she said, voice steady. "Together." Kale turned to her, eyes sharp, yet something unspoken flickered within them. "You do not yet understand," he said. "The curse is not simply a shadow. It is alive and it hungers. It feeds on fear, on anger, on regret. It will not rest until it consumes everything, my soul, perhaps even yours." Lyra did not flinch. She reached out and took his hand, careful and deliberate. "Then let it try. I am not afraid to walk through the darkness with you." For a long moment Kale studied her, and then slowly he nodded. "Perhaps that is what scares me most," he admitted. "Not the curse, not the shadows, but you." Lyra's heart skipped. She said nothing, letting her presence speak louder than words. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows, carrying a whisper that seemed almost like a voice. Kale stiffened. "They are close," he said, stepping in front of her. "The ones who hunt me. They know I have been claimed, and they will not stop until I am destroyed or until you are." Lyra followed his movement without hesitation. "Then we prepare," she said. "Tell me what to do." Kale's eyes softened slightly, though the storm within him remained. "There is a place," he said, voice low. "A hidden sanctuary in the city. Ancient wards protect it, though not fully against the curse. If we can reach it, we may survive the night, and perhaps gain time to find a solution." He led her through narrow streets, fog curling around their feet like silent snakes. The city seemed different at night, alive, dangerous, and filled with secrets that only those attuned to its magic could perceive. Shadows moved in corners, eyes glinting faintly in the lantern light, but Kale's presence kept them at bay, his aura sharp and commanding even when his body trembled from the curse's influence. As they entered the sanctuary, Kale lowered himself to the ground, hands pressed against the stone floor. "The wards are weak," he murmured. "The curse senses my presence, and it will test me tonight." Lyra knelt beside him. "Then we face it together," she repeated, voice firm. The shadows in the room began to twist and writhe, coalescing into forms that Kale recognized instantly. Faces of those who had betrayed him long ago, shadows of former allies who had turned into enemies, and whispers of curses that had once destroyed entire kingdoms. Kale's body tensed, his hands clenching the floor as he muttered fragments of incantations, his voice rough but commanding. Lyra could see the effort it took for him to maintain control, and her heart ached at the visible strain. "You do not have to do this alone," she whispered, gently placing her hand on his arm. "I am here, I will not leave you." Kale's eyes flicked to hers, storm and vulnerability mingling in their depths. "Even if I destroy you," he hissed. "I trust you," she said simply. "Even if you falter, I will stay." The shadows surged, testing their resolve. They shifted into horrifying illusions. The city burning, Kale's kingdom lost again, Lyra hurt or gone. Kale roared, slamming his fists against the floor, his voice a mixture of pain and defiance. "I will not let this consume us," he shouted. Lyra held his hand tightly. "You are not alone," she cried. "We can face it together." The room trembled as the shadows writhed violently, but slowly Kale's strength began to hold. His voice steadied, the curse recoiling against his determination, yet it left lingering marks in the room, shadows that whispered and writhed in corners, never fully gone. Finally, after what felt like hours, the illusions dissipated. Kale collapsed onto the floor, exhausted, sweat glistening on his forehead. Lyra knelt beside him, hands trembling as she held his arm. You survived," she whispered. Kale's chest heaved, but a flicker of gratitude passed through his stormy eyes. "Thanks to you," he murmured. "Your presence, it is a light I did not think I would see again. But this is only the beginning. The curse is not gone, it only waits, biding its time." Lyra nodded. "Then we will be ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." The nights that followed were tense and exhausting. Kale's curse remained a constant threat, sometimes flaring without warning, sometimes lingering like a cold shadow in the corner of the room. Lyra learned to read him, to anticipate the signs of the curse's influence, and to offer steady hands and calm words when his temper flared or fear overtook him. One night, as a storm raged outside, Kale finally spoke of a forbidden truth. "There is a way to end this curse," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "Ancient texts, hidden artifacts, rituals long forgotten, but it is dangerous. Many who tried have lost everything or themselves." Lyra's eyes widened. "Then we must try," she said firmly. "Whatever it takes, I will help you." Kale studied her, dark eyes searching, measuring the depth of her resolve. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked. "The ritual will demand more than courage. It will demand trust, sacrifice, and perhaps even a piece of your soul." Lyra's hand found his again. "Then I will give it," she said. "If it is the price of saving you, I will pay willingly." For the first time in years, Kale allowed himself to hope, though cautiously. He had been broken for so long that even the faintest light frightened him. Yet Lyra's courage and unwavering presence drew out a part of him he thought lost forever, a fragile glimmer of trust and connection. Days later, while searching the old archives beneath the city for the texts Kale had mentioned, they were confronted by a rival alpha. The man was ruthless, a predator who had sensed Kale's weakness and sought to claim him, or destroy him before he could regain his strength. Kale's body tensed immediately, aura flaring, the curse stirring in response to the threat. "Stay behind me," he ordered, eyes blazing. "Do not step forward." Lyra's hand remained in his, steady and fearless. "I am not afraid," she said softly. The rival Alpha attacked, but Kale met him head-on. Magic and strength clashed, the air filled with sparks of power and shadows. Lyra watched, heart pounding, as Kale fought with a mixture of skill, desperation, and raw determination. Finally, the rival retreated, recognizing the danger of Kale's combined strength and the strange, unspoken bond that linked him to Lyra. Kale sank to his knees, exhausted, and Lyra knelt beside him immediately. "You," he whispered, voice ragged. "You are more dangerous than any enemy, not because of strength but because you remain here. You stay even when the world would tell you to run." Lyra smiled faintly, brushing sweat-damp hair from his face. "Because someone must," she said. "Because even the broken deserve someone who believes in them." Kale's lips twitched, almost a smile, though his eyes remained dark and wary. "Perhaps together we may yet survive this," he murmured. "But the curse, it grows stronger, and soon it will demand more than either of us can bear." The storm outside raged on, and inside a fragile peace settled over them. They had faced shadows, enemies, and the curse's first true test, and survived. Yet both knew that the path ahead was far from safe. Kale's darkness remained, waiting, whispering, hungering, and Lyra's courage would be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. Cliffhanger, that night, as the wind howled through the city, Kale's voice echoed in the small room. "The curse is waking, and it will not stop until it claims all it desires. Tomorrow, we may not survive together." The night in Ashdon was darker than ever, the clouds hiding the moon, the city bathed in shadows that seemed alive. Inside the small sanctuary where Lyra and Kale had taken refuge, the air was thick with anticipation and fear. Tonight would test them as never before. The curse that had haunted Kale for years was stirring fully, stronger and more relentless than ever. Its whispers echoed in the walls, in the floors, and in Kale's very blood, tugging at the darkest parts of his soul. Lyra moved quietly, setting candles around the room in a careful pattern. She had studied the ancient texts Kale had discovered, learning the ritual that could weaken the curse. It required not just power, but trust, courage, and selfless intent. Any mistake could be fatal, and the shadows outside seemed to sense her determination, flickering and shifting like dark specters eager to strike. Kale stood near the center of the room, tense and wary. His eyes, usually stormy, now shone with a strange mixture of fear and determination. He studied Lyra as she moved, the faint glow of the candles reflecting in his dark pupils. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked, voice low and rough. "If I fail, or if you falter, we may not survive the night." Lyra met his gaze firmly. "Then we do not falter," she said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Kale's lips pressed into a thin line, but a flicker of gratitude passed through his eyes. "Together," he repeated, as if saying it aloud made it real. The ritual began simply, with whispered words and careful gestures. Lyra held a small crystal, humming softly as Kale recited the incantations that bound the curse to his blood. Shadows swirled around them, responding to every word, every movement, twisting into grotesque forms that reminded Kale of his past, of betrayal, loss, and pain. The first wave of the curse hit hard. The shadows coalesced into visions of Kale's fallen kingdom, burning towers and faces of those who had betrayed him. Kale fell to his knees, fists pressing against his eyes as he fought to maintain control. Lyra knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his arm. "You are not alone," she whispered. "I am here, we are together." Kale's eyes met hers for a fleeting moment, and in that glance a bond deeper than fear or desire formed. "If I falter, promise me," he said, voice strained. "Promise me you will not blame yourself." "I will not," she said firmly, squeezing his hand. "I am here because I choose to be. Nothing will make me leave you." The shadows surged again, stronger this time. They tried to pull Kale into despair, twisting memories of loss into sharp, cutting shapes. Kale roared, his voice raw with pain, but Lyra's calm presence kept him anchored. She stepped closer, holding his hands in hers. "Focus on me," she said. "Not the past, not the shadows. Focus on the here and now, on us." For a moment the darkness hesitated, as if unsure how to respond to this unshakable connection. Kale's body shook violently, sweat beading on his forehead, yet he held onto Lyra's hands with all his strength. His voice, though ragged, was steady. "Together, always together." The ritual intensified, the air humming with magic and tension. Lyra's voice grew stronger as she recited the final lines of the incantation, the crystal in her hand glowing brighter with every word. The shadows writhed and screamed, trying to resist the purification of the ritual. Kale's aura flared, a mixture of light and darkness battling within him. "You are doing well," Lyra said, her voice firm. "Do not let the shadows win. You are stronger than this curse." Kale's gaze met hers, full of storm and fire. I feel it weakening," he said. "Because of you, because you never left me." The shadows screamed one last time, then began to dissolve, vanishing like mist under the morning sun. Kale collapsed to his knees, exhausted but alive. Lyra knelt beside him, supporting him as he rested his head against her shoulder. "It is over," she whispered, tears of relief in her eyes. "You are free." Kale's eyes, usually dark and guarded, softened as he looked at her. "Free," he repeated, his voice trembling. I thought I would never feel this light again." "You are free," Lyra said, smiling faintly, "and you are not alone anymore." For the first time in years, Kale allowed himself to feel hope. The curse had been broken, not by power alone, but by trust, courage, and the bond they had forged. He reached out, taking her hands in his, and for a moment they simply held each other, feeling the quiet strength of survival and connection. Days passed, and the city of Ashdon seemed different to them both. The shadows had retreated, and even Kale's aura, once dark and stormy, now carried a faint warmth. Lyra and Kale explored the city together, cautious but determined to reclaim the life the curse had stolen from him. Kale began to speak of his past, of the kingdom he had lost, of the friends and allies he had trusted, and of the mistakes that had left him broken. Lyra listened patiently, never judging, offering gentle words and quiet encouragement. With every conversation, every shared moment, Kale's trust in her deepened. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Kale and Lyra stood on the balcony of the small house, watching the golden light fade into twilight. Kale's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. "I never thought I could feel hope again," he said softly. "And yet here I am standing beside you." Lyra smiled, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. "You are not alone anymore," she said, "and you will never be." Kale's lips pressed against the top of her head, a gesture of quiet gratitude and tentative affection. "I do not know if I deserve this," he murmured. "This second chance you do," Lyra said simply, "because you fought and because you allowed yourself to be saved. We saved each other, Kale." Kale nodded, eyes reflecting the fading light of the sun. "Together," he repeated, a word that had become a promise between them. Their bond deepened, no longer defined by chains, fear, or the curse. They had walked through darkness and emerged into light, changed, stronger, and bound by more than circumstance. Kale's power returned, tempered by humility and the memory of the curse, while Lyra's courage shone brighter than ever. Yet even in this newfound peace, they knew that shadows lingered. The city of Ashdon held secrets, rival alphas, and remnants of magic that could still challenge them. But together, they faced the future with courage, trust, and an unspoken understanding that whatever came, they would confront it side by side. Kale turned to Lyra, his dark eyes gentle but filled with intensity. "The curse tried to claim me, to destroy everything I cared for," he said. "But it did not succeed. Because of you, because of us." Lyra smiled faintly, squeezing his hands. "It will not succeed, not ever. We are stronger than it, stronger than anything." Kale's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile, the first in years. "Then let us see what comes next," he said, voice soft but resolute. Together. Outside, the city of Ashdon was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Shadows lingered in corners, but they were no longer frightening. They were reminders of the trials they had endured and overcome. Lyra and Kale stood together, soul-bound, transformed, ready to face whatever the world might throw at them. Kale's voice, low and reflective, broke the silence. "The curse is gone, yet I feel its memory in me. It is a warning, a reminder, and perhaps a guide. But now I am not afraid, not with you." Lyra rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You never have to be afraid again," she whispered. "Not while I am here." The first rays of sun crept over the city, lighting their faces with warmth and hope. Kale pulled Lyra close, the shadows of his past finally at peace, replaced by trust, love, and the knowledge that they could face anything together. The world had tested them, challenged them, and demanded sacrifices. But through courage, compassion, and unwavering trust, they had not only survived, they had transformed. Broken no longer, Kale rose as a man tempered by darkness and light, and Lyra, brave and steadfast, stood beside him as his equal, partner, and heart.